What's up, guys? Welcome to Overwatch Database. This week we'll be bringing you our new power rankings for Week 2 of the Overwatch League 2021 season. So there were a few changes we made here, specifically more for our top 10, and I'll let Brett get started with that.
Yeah, so we're gonna kind of break this down into I feel like there's like three tiers of teams right now. And the first tier is the bottom five. So this week, in number 20, we have the LA Valiant, and number 19 is the Vancouver Titans. That's exactly the same as last week. I think those are kind of clearly the worst two teams in the league. Number 18, we have the Guangzhou Charge. You could make an argument maybe that they should be lower, but we've only seen two games out of them, so I kind of want to see a little more before deciding that they're worse than Vancouver or the Valiant. Number 17, we have the London Spitfire. This is a team, obviously, not just because I'm a fan. I also thought they would actually be better than a lot of people thought coming into the season. But they were really, really disappointing, getting 3-0'd in both of their matches. One by the Gladiators and one by the Houston Outlaws. So that was really disappointing. I was expecting a lot more out of them. Number 16, we have the Boston Uprising. Another team, again, I was really excited about. I thought would kind of overperform expectations, and I think kind of a lot of people did actually. Had them kind of higher up on their rankings. But again, another team that got 3-0'd, kind of like London. They played really good teams. They played the Gladiators and Dallas. However, I do think of all these bottom five teams, I think Boston probably has the most potential to improve as the season goes on. So that's our first tier. Those are the teams that are just like the clear cut, five worst teams so far.
Yeah, because they're all 0-2, except for the Titans, which are 0-4 in all their games right now, which honestly I would put them last because of all the losses they have there compared to the other teams. But I mean, Valiant, it's Valiant. They're not going to do great at all this season, so I understand why that's 20.
Yeah, no, I put Vancouver 19th because I was kind of going by neither of them have a win, so I was kind of going by if they played each other, who do I think would win. And Vancouver has taken maps off teams. I think Vancouver's actually taken a map at least in every single game.
In every game, yes, they have. Mm-hmm.
So there's the bottom five. And then the second tier, these are teams that aren't going to win stage tournaments. But, these are kind of teams that I think that any given day can upset most of the top 10 teams. But they're not going to do it consistently. And those are the next five teams, is that second tier. So number 15, we have the Hangzhou Spark. They did go 0-2 in their debut week, but they took maps in both. And I actually think they showed a lot of promise. I think New York, who they lost to in their in their second game, is actually pretty good. And of course they lost to the Fusion, but they did take a map off Philadelphia, and I think Philly's the best team in the league. So I thought they had an okay debut week. And I think they are a team that can beat a lot of top 10 teams on the right day, in the right meta. Number 14, Paris Eternal. I really liked what I saw. I really wanted to put this team higher. I couldn't bring myself to put them over Atlanta or Toronto yet, but I think they actually have a lot of potential. Their first game, they beat Vancouver pretty handedly after losing the first map. But I think Paris, kind of from what I saw in the opening weekend, they're really bad on control. They looked really good once they got onto payload and 2CP.
Yeah, over the weekend watching the Paris and the Houston game, that was honestly kind of iffy because on the control maps, like you said, they weren't so good. But when it comes to payload, they just are perfectly fine. I don't know what changes on those maps or what, but they're perfectly fine on those. Like when they played on Havana, when they played on Kings Row. I mean, it was always a close call getting the payload to those checkpoints. But I mean, both teams did the exact same thing. And it was a nail biter, honestly. And I totally see what you mean by the choke on the control maps, seeing that firsthand and how they recouped themselves during the payload maps and 2CP. Yeah, there's a difference there.
Yeah, I didn't think much of it against Vancouver because after the control map, they pretty much rolled Vancouver. But while they, lost to, Houston 3-1, they took a map off them, and they were very competitive in those maps against Houston. That was very close to going to, a map 5. So I thought they were really impressive, and I think they are a team that you kind of got to watch out for that can contend with some, more of those top 10 teams. And that's why this is the second tier I was talking about. These are the teams that aren't going to probably, take stage titles or anything, but can take games off top teams in the right meta. So number 13, we have the Atlanta Reign. I said it last week. I've never liked this roster. I've never liked Gator and Hawk. I don't think their support line is really that great. Their DPS are really good. Edison, Pelican, and Kai have all looked really good. And I think this team will win a fair amount of games this year. They really should have won during week 1. But yeah, so I think the DPS line is good enough to carry this team to a fair number of wins. And then at number 12 is the Toronto Defiant. Another team I think that I actually thought this team was getting underrated. I saw people putting them in like the bottom three of their power rankings, and I really never understood why. I think it's a really good roster, and they kind of showed that in week one. They didn't look particularly good against Vancouver in week one, but they looked a lot better against Atlanta outside of the first two maps that they lost when they reverse swept them. They looked really good. And I think this is a team that can upset most teams in the right meta on the right day. Next week, they actually play the Washington Justice and the London Spitfire. So I think there's a really good shot they come out of this stage 3-1 and qualify for the May Melee, the stage 1 tournament. So I think that's really great for Toronto. And not surprising to me, but I think surprising to a lot of people. Number 11, we have the New York Excelsior. They impressed me. I'm surprised that so many New York fans seemed so down on this team after the weekend. There was a lot of people that were just really weren't excited about this team. And yeah, you got, 3-0'd in your first game, but it was against Chengdu. I mean, they're a top 5 team. They've looked fantastic. So I don't think there's really anything to hang your heads there. And then, they beat Hangzhou 3-1, and I think Hangzhou is a decent squad. So I think there's something to really build off of there. And I think this team is actually pretty good. Next week, they play the Seoul Dynasty and the Shanghai Dragons. Those are tough. I don't know if they get a win in those two games. But if they can squeak one out and go 2-2 in the stage, I think you got to be really excited about that. I think this New York team is going to get only better as the year goes on. Being that they have so many rookies and whatnot, I think they will get better. So, and then the final, third tier, this is kind of the teams that I feel like... I know I didn't talk about tiers in the first one, but that was because, it was 1 week and we didn't really have a good grasp on where everybody stood, but I feel like we're starting to get one. So that's why I kind of wanted to break the teams up into, tiers here. So the third tier is essentially the top 10, and these are all teams I feel like in the right meta, at the right time, are capable of winning a stage. Not necessarily... Well, yeah, I'm actually, you know what? If they're capable of winning a stage, I will say that these are also teams in the right situation capable of, winning the championship in the perfect meta on the perfect day. And honestly, I'm just really excited that the league is so wide open that it actually kind of feels like there's 10 teams that are capable of doing that. Because I feel like in years past, it's like, yeah, the Shock are going to win it. Maybe, 1 or 2 of these teams could beat them. I feel like there's I guess 10 that actually are capable of winning a tournament. So at number 10, we have the Seoul Dynasty. They would be higher on the list, but we've just, we've only seen 2 games from them. That's kind of the problem with a lot of these teams is we've only seen 2. What I did kind of gather from opening weekend is they're going to be inconsistent once again. But I hope that maybe that was kind of, just a little bit of a, first weekend thing and they find a groove and are actually more consistent this season because I think they have a lot of potential if they figure out their consistency issues. Number 9, we have the LA Gladiators. Obviously not impressed with the Gladiators in week 1. Everybody had really high expectations. I put this team a little lower than most people. I had them 5th, 6th. But I still did not expect an 0-2, first week. But they bounced back really nice this week. But the reason I only put them in 9th is because, they got 2 3-0s, but it was against London and Boston. Those are 2 bottom 5 teams. I'm not going to get particularly excited about that. But they did look better. So now that they're 2-2, they've played all their qualifiers. We're yet to see if they will qualify for the May Melee tournament. But I hope they do, because I want to see them against some of these tougher teams again and see if they actually play better this time, because I believe they will. Number 8, we have the Florida Mayhem. Another team, we've only seen 2 games, and they won them both fairly well. I think that they made some, they could have won them a lot more convincingly, I guess. I think they made some sloppy mistakes, but I think they cleaned that up. This is a team that has the potential to be, I think, at their peak a top 5 team. We just need to really see more games. So at number 7, we have the Dallas Fuel. I know it's maybe kind of high to put a team with 2 losses, but they've done nothing but impress me, considering they lost Xe before the season started. And then also, their schedule in Stage 1 was so tough. Losing to Houston in the first game, that was concerning because we didn't really realize how good Houston was yet. But now that you look back on it, you're like, oh, that's not a bad loss. They barely lost that game. And then they 3-1 the Gladiators. And then this week, they come out and play Washington. And, Washington did beat them fairly convincingly. But I think Washington's also a very strong team. And Dallas did take maps off them. And then in their last game, they 3-0'd Boston. So they really have been impressive not having a hit scan. And I know they are going to be signing one at some point, they said. So I think this team can also only improve. Plus, Hanbin and Fearless is just such a good tank line. I don't think you can ever really count them out of a game with that kind of tank line. And actually, I will go as far to say we're going to talk about this a little more on Thursday in our week recap. But I think that Fearless has been the best Winston in the league this year, and I don't think it's been close. I think he has far and away been the best Winston. Maybe you might not say best main tank, because I don't think his Reinhardt is quite as good, though it has looked really solid. I will say it's looked better than I thought, but he's been the best Winston, not even close. Number 6, Shanghai Dragons. This is another team that probably should be higher, but I'm kind of rating the teams we have, seen less games a little bit lower till we see more. And they were, they're 1-1. Their first game they beat the Guangzhou Charge really, easily. And then in their second game they got swept by Chengdu. So it's a lot of hit or miss. We don't really know there. I obviously think this team's yeah, I have them at 6. I think they're probably a top 5 team. We just need to see more. Because they did have a lot of issues in that Chengdu series. They had a lot of things they need to clean up. It was very ugly on their part. And then number 5, these are like the cream of the crop so far this season. Number 5, the Washington Justice. So outside of Fearless, Mag, the rookie main tank for the Justice, has looked great. I think he kind of looked like arguably the next best Winston. So his debut went really well, and just the team's debut went really well. Obviously, their DPS line is crazy with Decay, Tuba, Jerry. I mean, they all look really good. Assassin looked really good. And then, obviously their tank line of Fury and Mag. Again, I was saying how good Mag looked, and Fury was same old Fury. But I think really where people need to, look at was the support line. That was everybody's big concern, was Bebe and Closer coming in. And I think, if anything, they shut that down. They looked great. I think they kind of probably put a lot of people's fears away that they were going to drag this team down. Specifically, Bebe on the Ana, I think, was the most impressive part. He was just hitting anti-nades like crazy and making big plays. And I just think that they clearly looked a lot better than what most of us thought. Even me being super high in this team, I was surprised how good the support line looked. So they're number 5. Getting into the top 4. At number 4, we have the Chengdu Hunters. That's a team that, if they had beat Philadelphia, I probably would have put them all the way number 1. But man, how impressive has Chengdu been? So in their first 4 games, they 3-0 Shanghai. They did lose a map against the Valiant, but won the series, pretty easily. Then they come out and 3-0 New York, who, then, New York went and beat Hangzhou. New York looks like they could be a pretty decent team, and they 3-0'd them, and then their only losses to the Fusion. So, I mean, Chengdu has been, I think, probably the biggest surprise, not because we didn't think they'd be good. I thought they'd be a top 10 team. I did not, however, think they'd be a top 5 team. That has been really surprising, and I think they're legit here to stay. I think Monk and Nisha and support, the support line are very good. Gaga has been amazing. He's another, rookie main tank that's been fantastic. Jinmu and Leave on DPS has been incredible, so that team is really solid. And then number 3, the San Francisco Shock. Again, they're kind of where they are. Well, 1, because they lost to one of the teams in front of them. And I didn't want to put them lower because they're the Shock. I mean, even though we've only seen 2 games, I think they're going to come out in week 4 and probably kick some butt. Specifically, they play the Florida Mayhem and the Atlanta Reign. Both those are kind of tough games. I think Atlanta, on a really good day, can beat pretty much anybody. And I think that Florida's really good. So those are both tough games, but I think if the Shock come out and win both of those, we'll be talking about them as kind of the clear second best team in the league again. Or maybe to some people the best, I don't know. And then getting into the top 2, at number 2, we have the Houston Outlaws, and being a fan of them, I will let Connor kind of talk about them for a minute.
Honestly, I didn't expect them to be as good this season as they're turning out to be. I mean, I've only stuck with them because, I started watching them the very first season, and I was like, oh, I like this team. I mean, they weren't, great or anything, and, they weren't consistent with being great or anything like that. But this season, oh my gosh, I don't know what's coming out of that team. I don't know if it's the rookies or just the team working really well together, but they're really improving from what we've seen over the past number of seasons with them. And they've had a number of close games, but not so close to question how they're playing. With the Eternal game and the Spitfire games, I mean, honestly, I was actually going to give London 1 point for that on the whole pick'ems thing if you're doing that. And yeah, that did not end up happening there. That was
well, and not even just because I'm a London fan. I thought with Dante being out, it would give us more of a shot, but no, we just looked terrible.
Well, I mean, I also made the Pick'em's prediction before I found out he was out, and I just saved it and didn't change it. So,
London, I think we'd be a lot better. We just really need an upgrade at support. Ripa, can you stop dying first in every fight, please?
I mean, was it the player or was it the enemy team? Was Houston just focusing
No,
the
it
supports, or
like
were the supports just like,
just Kellex and Ripa
hmm?
just died first every fight. It was so frustrating. But anyway, so yeah, no, Houston. Well, and I think so what you were saying about like you didn't know really like what was contributing to their success. I think it's the coaching. They have Harsha and Junkbuck as the two coaches, and they both came from the Shock and learned under Krusty, who's considered the best coach in the league. And then they have Cool Matt, who was a player I think in season 1 and 2, and he's the GM now. So I think the leadership is really, and even having Jake, who was a player, then he retired, then he was a caster, then he retired from that and went back to being and now he's a player coach. And so I think the leadership is really the big aspect of what's helped this team. And you look at the teams they beat, the Dallas Fuel, that's a really impressive win. And then they follow that up with beating the Shock, and then this week they come out and beat Paris, who I think is a little bit better than people thought, and then 3-0ing London. So yeah, they are really strong. And then number 1 in our rankings for the second week in a row is the Philadelphia Fusion. I had a small moment, just a small moment, when they lost that first map to the Hangzhou Spark. I had a small moment where I was regretting putting them number 1, and then they just came back, and I don't understand. I don't really understand how this team is as good as they are. Obviously, I think they have really good coaching. But I mean, they're missing so many players. They're missing half their starting lineup. And it's not that Hotba and Toby are bad replacements. They are not. They're good replacements, but I'm just very impressed. I think specifically Carpe has been incredible. Rascal's been really good. But just the whole team, the synergy is there that is surprising. I'm surprised how good Mono looks. I thought he didn't look very good for the NYXL last year on main tank. He's looked really good with Philadelphia. I think that really only strengthens the take that the coaching for Philly is really good and kind of contributes to the fact that the New York coaching has not been very good, which we kind of knew anyway. So yeah, just so impressive, considering all the adversity they've had, at the beginning of the year. And it's not like they're just beating bad teams. They beat Seoul in the first game of the season. That's a pretty good win. Their second game was against the Valiant. Nothing really there. But then they beat Hangzhou, and they beat Chengdu. Chengdu kind of almost looked like the best team in the league there for a minute, like for a very hot minute. They were just kicking the crap out of everybody, and people were kind of like, oh, is this the best team in APAC? And I think we do have a very clear pecking order now. Philadelphia is obviously the best team, and they're only going to get better when they get their players back. But Chengdu was there. Chengdu is right there in second, I think. I think Shanghai has a chance to get back up as the second best team in APAC, but I think right now it's Philly and Chengdu, and there's not really an argument to be made for anything else. So Philadelphia number 1 again. I think the biggest changes we had, probably we moved Houston up from 5th to 2nd. I just wanted to see them play some lesser teams and not choke, and they didn't. They still looked very strong. I think the Gladiators have a lot of room for improvement from 9th place. I think they'll probably continue to go up the rankings as the season goes on. I think that team will look better and better. And then I think the other only really big move we made was we put Paris from 18th to 14th. Again, they looked really impressive. I mean, beating Vancouver is not that impressive, but they were very competitive against Houston. And I think this is a team that maybe at their peak in the right meta could be top 10. I actually really do think that. So yeah, that's pretty much just my final thoughts on the power rankings. Before we wrap it up, do you have any, final thoughts on it, Connor?
No, I think you pretty much covered everything that, that we both share for our thoughts on these teams. I mean, of course, these other teams that we put as the bottom 5 have some chance of making it up, but I really doubt they will. I really don't know how that's going to end up, but I think these top 5 that we have, the bottom 5, are probably going to stay there, and more of the middle is going to start changing now, because we have a better understanding of these teams.
The middle will change a lot, but I do think the top 5 will change a lot too. I think Shanghai will probably jump back in there at some point. Obviously, I think they still have the potential to be like the best team in the league. But we've just only seen 2 games, and one of them happened to be a 3-0 to Chengdu. So maybe that's just an overreaction. But yeah, I pretty much agree. So that is our week 2 power rankings. Let us know in the comments if you think we have anybody too high or too low, or maybe we got it right. I mean, these probably are. I think these are the best power rankings I've ever seen, honestly. So let us know in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for notifications. Make sure you check back Thursday. We'll have our week 2 recap, as well at the end of that episode, our week 3 predictions. So that'll be Thursday, and then we'll see you next week with our next power rankings. Until then, enjoy the games this weekend, and we'll see you later.